Hello and welcome to another ranking video, and I figured with 2024 marking the overall 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters, more specifically this past June, and with it being Halloween, I figured what better way to celebrate the occasion than by ranking all the Ghostbuster movies from the original up to Frozen Empire. And without further ado, here's my ranking of all the Ghostbuster movies, and coming in at number 5 is the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, or as it's sometimes called, Ghostbusters Answer the Call. And before I go any further, I'm going to be referring to the theatrical cut of the movie, not the extended cut, because I never saw the extended cut. And from what I understood, apparently the extended cut makes the movie worse, given that it adds a lot of scenes that could have been taken out of the movie. And in a very rare occurrence, apparently the theatrical cut in this case is the superior cut. And keep in mind, just because I say this is the worst Ghostbusters movie, I do not think it's a bad movie. I just think that at its best or at its worst, I just think the 2016 Ghostbusters movie is just okay. So, what I liked about the movie, I liked the origin of this incarnation of the Ecto-1 in that sense where it started out as a hearse, which I think was both clever and hysterical. And I did like the fact that the inventor character created a lot more gadgets for the Ghostbusters to use to either capture or bust a ghost, instead just relying on the classic proton pack. And this movie at least tried to keep to the original conception of the original Ghostbusters movie in that sense where it tries to take four of the funniest comedians of its time and have them fight against ghosts. So at least they kept that much right about the conception of the franchise. Everything else about the movie is kind of a mixed bag. Starting with the humor, because with the exception of the bit with the hearse, along with the joke revolving around the old man at the very beginning of the movie, I thought a lot of the humor fell flat and wasn't very funny at all, which I find to be really weird given that this is directed by Paul Feige, if I'm pronouncing his name right, who directed movies ranging from 2011's Bridesmaids, which from what I heard was really funny, along with 2015's Spy, which I remember getting a ton of high praise, and while I thought the movie was a little overhyped, I still thought that movie was both fun and funny at the same time. So to have the same guy direct this movie, it just felt off to me. Because I know the guy could do humor, but the way he executed the humor in this just didn't work. And there are some points in time where the movie had some great ideas, but then it would go in a very different direction that would result in a bad idea, with one example revolving around this point in time where you have the characters looking for a ghost in a warehouse filled with mannequins and one of them is possessed. I thought that was a great idea for a ghost until you see what the actual ghost looks like, and that's where it became very anticlimactic. A lot of the human cast I thought was very unlikable, especially the main character, for the simple reason that she straight up murdered an innocent person and gets away with it. I mean, sure, I know the guy was being a jerk to them, but he didn't do anything wrong. The main villain, I thought, was pretty cringy in terms of both his demeanor, motivation, and his plan. I thought was really dumb. And a lot of the cameos from the original Ghostbusters movie are just distracting to a point that I sat there going, why am I watching this? I could be watching the original movie. And I thought a lot of the special effects just didn't look all that great to me, personally. Overall, even though I thought this movie was okay, I do think it is severely flawed. And before I go any further, get your pitchforks ready, because coming in at number 4 is Ghostbusters Afterlife. And before I go any further, I completely understand why a majority of people consider this to be the second best installment of the franchise compared to all the other installments. Like, I really do get it, because aspects of the movie I liked. Starting with the setting, I do think it's really refreshing to have a Ghostbusters movie set in a more rural, middle of nowhere town as opposed to New York. And I do like the tone where it's a lot more serious and somber compared to other installments. And I think as far as reintroducing the Ghostbusters is concerned, I think this movie does it the best. And it's also the one that incorporates fan service the best as well when comparing it to other legacy franchises utilizing fan service to appeal to the older fans. And I do think the actress playing Phoebe Spangler does a fantastic job in that sense, where not only does she have the mannerisms of Egon, but she does go in her own direction. And the movie has a lot of great production value, from set designs to actually having practical effects, which I wasn't expecting near the end of the movie, to even having the gear itself when the characters use it. It doesn't look brand new, it actually looks like it's been around for a while. So the movie actually has a lot going for it. But if you're wondering, okay, if the movie has this much good, why is it in fourth place? Here's my reasons. Reason number one, when the movie first came out, it received a lot of high praise from both movie critics and audiences, and I just didn't think the movie matched the hype that was given by said movie critics and audiences. Reason number two, this movie lacked a very big key component that was present in some of the other movies, which was a sense of strangeness, because when you watch that original movie, it would go in one direction, but then it would just go in a really weird direction the next moment that just caught you off guard. And this movie didn't have enough strange moments. Like, yeah, it had a lot of spooky stuff, but it didn't have that strange flavor like the original movie. Problem number three, the villain they fight against is one we've seen before, and it's just one of those things where I didn't really care for this particular villain, and I just wish they went in a different direction by either A, creating a brand new villain for the Ghostbusters to fight against, or B, if they're gonna use a villain that the Ghostbusters have fought against before, why not use one of the ghosts from the real Ghostbusters cartoon? Because the Ghostbusters fought plenty of foes throughout cartoon, and could have used fan favorites ranging from Sal Haim to, better yet, the Boogeyman. Given that within the context of the cartoon, Egon actually has history with the Boogeyman, and given that Egon's character plays a major part in this movie, that would have made so much more sense. But as it is, I was just not the biggest fan of the villain here. Reason number four, out of a 2-hour movie, it takes our main cast of characters forever to even catch their first ghost, which I find to be kind of funny, because in Ghostbusters 2, in a movie that's 80 to 90 minutes long, people's biggest complaint about it is that it takes 30 minutes for the Ghostbusters to catch their first ghost. Meanwhile, here's a movie that's 2 hours long, and it literally takes them what felt like an hour for our main cast of characters to even catch their first ghost. And yet, this movie is given a pass for some reason. Reason number five, of the plot lines that occur throughout this whole movie, honestly, other than the one revolving around Phoebe Spangler, the other two revolve around her brother and her mother I could have cared less about. And not only that, but the way the original Ghostbusters cast was intertwined into the narrative, I think could have been handled a lot better. So overall, I get why a lot of people like it. It's just, I wish it was better. Coming in at number 3 is Ghostbusters 2, and my history with the movie goes something like this. I remember watching this movie growing up, really liking it, and sometime way before the 2016 reboot came along, back when there were still rumors that a third Ghostbusters movie featuring the original cast was still in the works, I remember a lot of online criticisms aimed towards this movie being generally negative, but in recent years it's gained a lot of reprisal among people, saying, oh, it's really not that bad, which I'm happy about. But anywho, as far as my overall thoughts on this movie are concerned, you still have all of the original cast from the first movie playing off each other in regards to the quips or the chemistry they have with each other. The movie still has pretty decent special effects from the time period, and I also love the introduction of the slime in terms of how that plays into the movie. And I do love the climax conceptually, where we have the Ghostbusters fighting with a giant monster in this movie as opposed to the first movie where they fight against a giant monster. And it still has that trademark weirdness that the first one has. However, that all said, my problems with the movie are that I feel like this movie took influence from the cartoon in the worst way possible, in that sense where it definitely feels a lot more toned down. I mean, when you look at the Ghostbusters in this movie, they don't drink or smoke or swear as much as they did in the original movie, and totally it feels a lot more lighthearted compared to the original. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of the baby character of Oscar in terms of how he's incorporated into the narrative. And this movie, as far as the scares are concerned, it still has a few scares that are very reminiscent to the original movie, but it doesn't bite as hard as the original. And like I said with Ghostbusters Afterlife, it does take a little while for the Ghostbusters to catch their first ghost, but once they do, the movie does pick up from there. So overall, even though I do consider this to be a movie sequel that falls into the category of here you go again, as far as that type of sequel is concerned, I still think this is a very enjoyable installment. And coming in at number 2 is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which might surprise a lot of people considering that most people would rank this above the 2016 movie, and I will admit the movie does have some flaws. The biggest one being the simple fact that the common criticism this movie gets is one that I do agree with, is the fact that this movie has one too many characters, in that I think you could have removed 3 or 4 of them and I think the movie would have been better. I mean, seriously, did we really need to have Patton Oswalt deliver exposition on Garaka when that easily could have been Ray's part in the movie? Or did we really need to have that one technician get his hand frozen by Garaka's orb midway through the movie, which easily could have been Winston or Trevor? Or did we really need to have the introduction of the character Nadim as a living descendant of the Fire Masters, which easily could have been podcast discovering that he's actually from an ancient line of Fire Masters, which would have given him something to do, but I think you get my point. So, why do I rank this one above all the other Ghostbuster movies we've had? For me, it's simple. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is ideally the Ghostbusters sequel we should have gotten a long time ago. Because the biggest problem with all the other Ghostbuster movies are that they have to re-establish the Ghostbusters in some shape or form before they go off to fight ghosts. This year, they're already re-established fighting ghosts and continue to do so throughout the majority of the movie. I also do like the fact that this doesn't pull a Disney Star Wars trilogy, in that it doesn't pass the torch on from one generation to the next like so many of these rebooted movies do. This one here, it's more about having 2 different generations of characters working together to fight a common enemy. And unlike Ghostbusters 2, which I felt took influence from the, at the time, real Ghostbusters cartoon in the worst way possible, with Frozen Empire on the other hand, I feel like it takes influence from the real Ghostbusters cartoon in the best way possible, because it does seem to remind me of an episode, but it still has the same type of bite that the original movie had. I also do like the way this movie expands its own universe by introducing the Fire Masters, showcasing that way before the Ghostbusters existed, you already had a group of humans capturing supernatural entities using magic or some kind of superpower, in this case pyrokinesis, and this right here could easily open the door for future Ghostbusters movies by including other groups of humans who utilize different types of superpowers. And I did find Garaka to be a very chilling villain for our Ghostbusters to fight against. Pun intended, by the way. And this movie takes a problem I had with Ghostbusters Afterlife and includes it back into this movie, which is including that strangeness flavor that the original movie had. I mean, where else are you gonna watch a movie where you have the Ghostbusters chasing after a garbage bag possessed by a ghost? And not only does it have the same strange flavor as the original, but this movie also maintains the same kind of scare factor that the original movie had. Because when this movie gets creepy, it really does get creepy at points. Overall, while I do acknowledge this movie has its problems, I do think Frozen Empire was a great way to celebrate 40 years of the Ghostbusters franchise. And coming in at number 1 is, to no one's surprise, the original movie. Again, what can I say about this movie that has been said already? I mean, it's not only one of the most iconic movies to come out of the 1980s, it's just one of the most iconic movies of all time. because of how unique the movie really is in regards to the premise, the character dynamics, the lines of dialogue between the characters. Acting is top notch. You also have special effects that, even though they're dated by today's standards, I still do think really hold up very well. And the datedness of the special effects I actually think work to the movie's advantage, given the supernatural aspects of the movie. And not only that, but this movie does a good job of balancing out both the humor and the horror without it being a horror comedy. And I do like the setup that the Ghostbusters themselves are scientists, but they treat their job of busting ghosts as if it's a blue-collar job, which makes a lot of the situations they're in a lot more tangible. It also has a really memorable soundtrack as well. I mean, this movie is quite literally lightning in a bottle in that sense, where it's combining different genres, ideas, and tones to create a movie unlike anything else. It's an iconic classic for a reason. And there you have it. That's my ranking of all the Ghostbuster movies. What's been your favorite moment from the entire franchise, and how would you rank them? Happy Halloween, and see you later.